Yeah, so today I wanted to talk about a couple things. One is NFTs themselves, crypto itself, kind of like a crash course for people who aren't maybe super familiar with this space. And then I wanted to end with some of the partnerships that we have with Rocket, what we're working on right now. So the first part of this will record because it'll be easy and helpful to share it. But once we start talking about like, NDA related stuff at the end, I'll switch off the recording and I can tell everyone about what project we're working on right now. Cool. So yeah, I also want to mention that we did a talk last week with Dept and Byte, which is now also a part of Dept. Isabel Perry, who made a bunch of these slides. They were very helpful slides, so I stole a good portion of them for this talk. So I just want to give her credit where credit's due. So first, as much as I didn't want to talk about blockchain, because I feel like it's people trying to explain how the internet works when they're also trying to explain to you how a website works, I wanted at least to have like an easy analogy for a few of these lingo things that come up in the crypto space all the time. So let's start with blockchain. It's a ledger, right? Like Excel is basically blockchain. Like there was a transaction from Jesse to Ashley. It was one breakfast sandwich. Brandon to Imogene. I'm sorry, Dave to Imogene, Brandon to Ayla, whatever. And they just keep adding on the ledger. The difference between blockchain and an Excel thing is essentially, at its core, is that it's immutable. Like the ledger's there forever. I can't go back and like delete a row. But essentially, blockchain is just a decentralized database. When you think about decentralization or the internet in general, you always have a node, which is basically a computer. In the case of Algorand, which is a blockchain, you can run that on the micro instance on AWS. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi. The only thing that really takes up space is the actual ledger itself, which can be somewhere in like 5 to 10 gigabytes, but it doesn't take a lot of computing power to run a lot of these nodes on most of modern blockchains today. So it's a decentralized database. Don't think about it more than that. Smart contracts are sort of what make the big difference between a lot of blockchains and like just cryptocurrencies, right? So if you think about Bitcoin, that's a cryptocurrency. But when you want to do something more than that, like I want to exchange an asset, or I want to trigger a bunch of things that happen when some transaction is made, you need a smart contract for that. The analogy is basically that it's escrow. They're complex agreements that happen between two parties, and there has to be some kind of signing of that transaction before the thing moves. That's a smart contract. They look crazy when you start to look at them, depending on what blockchain technology you're looking at, because essentially most of them compile down to bytecode or assembly code. So that's probably the stickiest, hardest part to learn if you're going to dive into this from a development perspective. This is an example from Algorand. They use a programming language called Teal, but they also have a package called, or I should say the community has a package called PyTeal, and it's one way to interact with that and kind of compile that down. But it's different for every blockchain. I just want to mention that smart contracts are sort of where it gets complex and sticky. Wallets, you'll hear this come up a lot. It's where you keep all your stuff. It's like an email where you have access to it and you can send stuff out from it and you can receive stuff from it, but only you can view the contents of it. You can have multiple wallets, just like you can have multiple email accounts, but that's essentially what's containing all the valid data that you have owned this thing on a blockchain. All right, so let's talk about what NFTs are. An NFT is basically, it has to be a unique digital item and it exists on a blockchain. So again, that decentralized database ledger. If you think about what a fungible item is, NFT stands for non-fungible token. I think I forgot to mention that. A fungible item is basically anything that's replaceable, right? Like 1 kilogram of gold, 1 Bitcoin. Those are, I should probably use my speaker notes for this. Those are currencies that can be exchanged for other currencies, or for, I could swap 1 bar of gold for another bar of gold. But what makes NFTs unique or different is that they are unique. Like a painting would be unique, or maybe the title to your car is unique, something like that. So that's where NFTs come into play. And that's why a lot of people are sort of excited about these as a different use case for the blockchain. So if you've been paying attention to the news, there's a whole bunch of chatter, I guess, around all this digital art that's being sold and whatnot. So this has been happening for a while, but really it's blown up recently. If you look at the end of that timeline, you can see there's Jack Dorsey had signed his first tweet. I think he sold that, 2.9 million. There's a lot of money for digital artists right now to be made. And you might be thinking like, can't I just also go download that image and have it for me? Like, yep, yes, you can. But someone else can prove that they own it. And I think that's the key thing here. We'll get to that in a second. There was another auction at Christie's for this artist Beeple, who put together a mosaic of his work and essentially sold that as an NFT for $69 million. He is now the third most living valuable artist because of this sale. Again, we can all see the image as well, but somebody else owns it. I don't know if anyone remembers this art installation. It was called Comedian, and it was a banana duct taped to a wall. There were 3 editions that were sold. The first 2 were sold for $120,000 each, and the third one was fetching $150,000. This raised a lot of questions like, couldn't anyone do that? And like, yes, but what is art? I think is a bigger question there. But this was a quote from the people who were doing this art auction. The purchased editions come with a certificate of authenticity. The banana can be replaced as needed. So it brings up this question of, what is ownership? Like, what does it mean to have that certificate of authenticity? Do you own a rotten banana, or do you own the rights to display it? So it started being like, we had this conversation internally too, and I've been trying to bring this up with brands that we talk to about this, but the value of ownership is something that needs to be thought of differently. And I shouldn't even say differently, it just needs to be, there needs to be better analogies for this decentralized world. So if we think about a song, right, a digital file, a song. I have this song on my computer. It's Stray Cat Struck by the Stray Cats. They didn't really branch out too much with the naming there. I bought this on Amazon years ago. It doesn't have any DRM, but do I own the song? Like, I have a license to play it, but I have the file too. I could send that to anyone I want. So is the meaning of ownership that I'm the only one who has access to it? Or is the meaning of ownership being able to prove that I own it, right? So if you think about songs, there's nothing inherently built into the song to protect its usage and pay the right people. There are other tools around that. You see on YouTube all the time, people getting content strikes for copyright warnings for songs that play. There's other things in the industry that will manage like rights management like this, but having a blockchain, a verifiable ledger that everyone can look at to see who that owner is actually pretty compelling. If we look at all these, so if you think about like NFT marketplaces where you can buy digital art, where you can sell stuff, OpenSea.io is a popular one, Nifty Gateway is another one. There's a lot of them, and there's only going to be more and more every day. And I can tell you that because we're building some right now. So there's most of these right now are running on Ethereum. Ethereum prices are very high. We'll start talking about that in a moment. But essentially, I want to talk about the digital aspect of NFTs before we get to other aspects of NFTs. So what's a good use case for NFTs in the digital world? Video games. So I don't know if anyone knows what this reference is from, but this is from South Park. It was with the World of Warcraft episode. It won an Emmy, and it is very famous. And it's a hilarious episode because basically there's this nerd who's killing everyone in the game, who's been playing World of Warcraft so long that they have to find this one sword called the Sword of 1,000 Truths that they have to get to the kids in South Park so that they can save the day. The interesting thing about this is that this is a real problem in a lot of massive multiplayer games where there are a limited number of items. There's a limited number of weapons. There's a limited number of clothing or whatever. And it is, oh, someone off mute? I'm gonna mute you, buddy. Oh no, I can't. Ayla, can you mute that person? So anyway, so video game assets are interesting because then you can basically have a verifiable way to exchange that, sell it on the secondary market. I'm sure you've heard of people who create World of Warcraft characters in their spare time and sell them for real money. Like there's a very real in-game and out-of-game economy in the digital space. Damn it, Daigle. Come on, Daigle. Don't give me that feedback loop. All right. So another use case of this, if you didn't see this coming, Fortnite, right? They have a whole bunch of customizations for your character, dances, skins, weapons, whatever. They don't necessarily give you a leg up, but it is definitely a form of digital fashion and expression. And being able to prove that you own that and sell that and resell that on the secondary market is very compelling. Speaking of digital fashion, that panel we did last week with Dept, a lot of it was centered around digital fashion. So, Byte, that company that's now part of Dept, they are big on the AR space, and they make a lot of AR filters, Snapchat filters for different brands. This is actually growing a lot right now. I think we'll see more and more talented digital artists create stuff that will be sold and resold on these marketplaces, as opposed to just JPEGs. Let's talk about NBA Top Shot and limited editions. Okay, So NBA Top Shot is a massive marketplace. It is the marketplace, and I'll show you in a minute why that is. But essentially what it is you're unpacking digital cards. And what those cards are these like moments, these snapshots in time. You know, LeBron James replicating the famous Kobe dunk, or maybe it's somebody else just like stuffing someone before they get the shot in. There's a whole bunch of different ones you can open that have different value. You can see maybe right there what the value of that particular video is. It's a lot. You can go on YouTube and look up videos of people opening like $1,000 packs and seeing what those videos are. The limited edition thing is interesting. So this is very popular in these NFT digital marketplaces where you might have one of 500 or something. You might have one of 200,000 of something. The interesting thing about that, especially in the art world and really anywhere, is that what number edition you have also reflects in the price. So if you had one of 1,000, that's going to be worth more than 1,000 of 1,000. And that's true for all these digital goods as well. So the interesting thing here is when I saw this, I was like, what? Who is like just burning money on digital cards? Like, I don't like basketball that much, but maybe that's why I felt that way. And then it dawned on me, oh, I did that. When Magic the Gathering Arena came out, I bought 2 packs of digital cards for about $100 and like made my deck, and I was playing it, and I was like, I'm the guy that does that. And I don't even have an NFT to prove it, which is just goes to show that it turns out I would do it as long as I'm actually interested in what it is. And so I had a bit of a humbling moment when I realized that. Speaking of humbling moments, NBA Top Shot makes up the majority of these sales. They have crushed their sales for everything they've done through that Top Shot thing. So a lot of people are sort of chasing them down. There's other interesting marketplaces out there like Decentraland. If you've ever watched or read Ready Player One and you know about the Oasis, it's kind of that idea where there's this digital landscape, there's a digital world that you could buy land in it. And I'm not kidding, it's super expensive. Like I think the cheapest plot of land is like $12,000, and it goes upwards of like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just depends on where you want to bank your money, I guess, and like plan on the future. Who knows? Maybe that thing will be the Oasis. I'm not sure. If we look about, I was talking about collectibles, right? Like the editions. It might, if you think about the actual value driven by that, you can create much more value from one thing that you've created, right? I have one video of LeBron James doing this dunk, but I can make 500 editions of it and sell that many times. So that ends up making a lot more of the money was when you're doing collectibles. So we're seeing a lot of brands very interested in this as well. Is this a bubble / is it hype? Yeah, definitely. Everyone we've talked to, all brands and creators alike, agree that we are definitely in a hype phase right now, but brands and creators alike can see past that and know that there is a realistic future of using this for like actual products, actual things, actual marketplaces that make sense. What I would say that we're looking at the Gartner hype cycle, we are right near the peak of inflated expectations, but I think a lot of people are looking forward toward that like slope of enlightenment kind of thing. Like what could we actually use this for, and trying to brainstorm some interesting ideas, which we'll cover off in a minute, some interesting ideas for these things. But I want to talk about the environmental impact first. So this slide we used in the talk as well, the unsustainable elephant in the room. When you think about blockchains like Ethereum and Bitcoin, they use mining to do that, proof of work. And to do that, it uses a lot of energy. It just does. It's like computers, graphics cards, they're running like 24 hours a day at full capacity usually. So you can see this comparison here about like how much energy usage it was to mint a single NFT and what that equates to. But I want to be real cautious about this. So when you think about transactions on these networks, it's not just one transaction causes all this. There's a bunch of transactions that get processed at the same time. So this is a bit of a lie. In fact, it goes a little further too, because all these people who are doing this minting, or this mining rather, it's in their best interest to use the cheapest energy they can find, or just not run it at all. Otherwise, they're not making any profits. That said, this is now on the New York Times like homepage, or sorry, front page about it's warming the planet, climate change, environmental stuff. So we have seen so many brands, including many people at Dept, being very concerned about this. In fact, it was the very first thing that Dept brought up to me when they were like, "What about the green aspect?" And I was like, as an American, I honestly hadn't even thought about it. And now I'm sort of thinking about it, but at the same time, it's still a bit of a myth. And that's because proof of work is mining, proof of stake is not mining. I kind of covered that a little bit. That's an oversimplification, but it's good to think of it that way. This is energy consumption across those different networks. You can see that proof of stake, Tezos, I don't know how to pronounce that, is one of those. Algorand's another one. They can do many more transactions per second, and it's a lot less energy to do it. Now, I was saying it's a bit of a lie. A lot of these mining operations come out of Iceland, where there's a surplus of there's a surplus of energy thanks to natural sources like geothermal, hydro, wind. But there's big companies there. This one's Genesis Mining that has humongous operations for doing mining out of Iceland. So it does beg this question of, well, okay, is there a surplus of energy? Sure. Is it hurting anyone? No, but could that energy be used for something else? Like there's a lot of aluminum production happening in Iceland as well. Maybe it's squeezing them out. It's hard to say. It's not that clear either. And even though I showed that calculation before, it actually isn't that easy to measure the cost of a transaction. A transaction can be just exchanging cryptocurrency. It's very simple. Or it could be one of those smart contract things where it's got a lot to do. There's a lot more to process. So it varies. But at the same time, this is very much front and center in conversations, and I want to make people aware of it. When we think about transactions, like I was just saying, some are simple, some are complex. There has to be something to fuel those transactions and incentivize people to continue to do the mining or to continue to run these nodes. And on Ethereum, that's called gas, but really you can just, some other networks call it gas as well, like they do on Neo. But you can just think of it as fees. The same way that you would swipe a credit card, it's 2.9 cents on Stripe, or Amex is 10% or whatever the hell they do. Same concept, except that instead of it is kind of a percentage, but it's all based on the price of the actual coin itself. So in the case of Ethereum, that average transaction fee will vary. You can see there that the average one over a lifetime was $16.74, but there have been some peak moments where it's been very high. So we know someone who used to work at Rocket that went to create a company that was basically allowing people to do user login and auth stuff on Ethereum, but every time someone would sign in and a transaction would happen, it would cost them a boatload of money. So they shut down their company. It's just, it happens. So anyway, because of this Ethereum fee problem, we're starting to see a lot of other interest in other blockchains. And you couple that with the green problem, and you got a lot of brands who are just shying hard away from Ethereum right now. Ethereum 2.0 is in the works. It has been for a while, and that's going to basically make Ethereum a proof of stake blockchain instead of proof of work. They've been working on it for a while. It's not clear when it's going to finish. Could be 12 months. It could be 18 months. Could be less than 12 months. That's hard to say, but it is in the works. They know that it's important. Let's talk about real world stuff for a second. So we've talked a lot about digital things, but I personally think that the real value comes in with real world verification. So if you want to think about examples here, literally just anything you want to prove ownership of, anything, especially paper-based systems. So, in the future picture, we'll be showing a QR code for something. Maybe it's from our digital wallet. Maybe it's from my healthcare provider or the brand or whatever that I bought the NFT from. But titles for your car, the vaccine cards are all carrying around, and people are like, "What if I lose it?" You could have a share in a boat, concert tickets. Investigative journalism was a really interesting one that we were talking about recently, where essentially you could kick in by buying your share of an investigative journalism story, and then essentially crowdfunding it. And then if they ever sold it to Netflix for a docuseries, you could get a cut. Now that starts to talk about what we call perpetuals, where basically you can trade this later, and the original creators too would get a cut of it. So that's another aspect of real world stuff that's pretty interesting. But if you start to think about tying that stuff in, and I'll give you a better example later when I can name the brand that we're working with, but these are a few easy real world examples that you can start to get pretty creative. And if you do, please let me know, because I love hearing them. So let's talk about the white label marketplace. So this is essentially the high level of what Rocket is building right now. So white label meaning, any brand can kind of like slap their stuff on it and theme it, so to speak, and then we can customize it from there. The very first question we should ask is, why use blockchain at all, right? If we're going to go through a central brand, like I was just showing that QR code, and let's say, oh, you want to prove that that I owe breakfast sandwiches to Jesse. Well, let me open up the Rocket Insights breakfast sandwich blockchain wallet app thing or whatever. I'm inherently going through a trusted authority, which is not blockchainy at all. So it begs the question, why use the blockchain? And it becomes down to that trusted verified ledger. It's, trust but verify. If they own this database, then it's on the brand to do that. But now they can point to something else that's not theirs, that they don't own, that's decentralized. They can say, anyone can prove ownership on that thing. We just also can. And that's very intriguing to a lot of brands that want to get into this. So we're working with Algorand. And so why Algorand? So for brands, well, for one, they're based out of Boston. We have a close network of with them around Circle, the crypto bank. Jesse and Ashley were part of the early team there at Circle, so we've known them for a long time. And they also are very closely affiliated with MIT. We also do a lot of work with MIT. From a brand's perspective, it's really nice because you can go to the Algorand website and see, like, this is a company. I can contact them. I can call them. There's stuff about MIT all over the site, even if you weren't paying attention to like blockchain lingo. But if you go to Ethereum, you're like, there's no one to call. It's like Ethereum.org. It's an open source thing. There's no real company to call. You can call companies that build stuff on Ethereum, but it makes people feel uneasy if they can't talk to the actual companies themselves. So that's been just that right away was like kind of eye-opening to me. It's like, yeah, I mean, you know, brands want that sort of that almost like that support feeling. Like, I know I can call someone, I can pick up the phone and talk to somebody about this stuff. Algorand has its own blockchain, as I mentioned, or is a blockchain. So their coin is called the Algo. It has been slowly ticking up like all other cryptocurrencies for a while now. Another great thing about Algorand is its transactions per second. So this is one of those values that's actually really important.
Tengo el enchufe.
I think that people overlook it a lot. Jorge, you're off mute. Cool. And then, so yeah, so basically they're also doing work this year to not only shrink the time of block finalization, but to also significantly increase the amount of transactions per second that they can handle. That's a really big deal. If you think about it, like Visa can process about, I think it's 26,000 or maybe it's 56,000 transactions per second, but on average they do about like 9,000 a second. I think Bitcoin can do 7. I think Ethereum can do somewhere in like the 50s. So I'd have to look that up though. Someone can call me out on that one. But essentially, when you think about transactions per second, it's like, that's fine if I'm the only one doing the transactions. But when you have a bunch of people in the world, like trying to pay for stuff at the same time, or like, you know, close these smart contracts out, being able to support a lot of transactions per second is very important. So that number right there, 1,000 to 46,000, 46,000 is like, where you're talking like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, that's like the number you need for transactions per second if you're thinking about using this for, at least for money. So that was really important. The other thing we're using to kind of speed up their time to market here, and you know, we can always swap this piece out later, is PureStake. So PureStake works with a handful of different blockchains, but essentially it gives us a pool, a cluster of nodes that we can tap into and that we can use privately, like for API calls and all that stuff. So we don't have to like set up our own node. They have documentation to set up your own node. You can do it, but you don't have to. And so you can start here, and maybe this would be the piece you chop out later to like save some money, but it's a great way to get up and running. We're also using Icon. Now this is pronounced Icon, and I point this out for a good reason. So Icon does basically authentication on the blockchain, but the reason I point out that it's pronounced like Icon is because there's also a coin by the rapper Akon. He is doing this for his 1 square mile in Africa, where he's going to build the new Wakanda. And anyway, a coin by Akon, not to be confused with Icon, the auth service. It gets squirrely. So Icon is basically SSO for the blockchain. You can think about it like auth0 on the blockchain. Gives us a bunch of different ways to log in. You set a PIN for your wallet, because what they're doing behind the scenes is also creating you a wallet that you can use on the blockchain. That like when I set it up as a developer, I pick what blockchain I want to use. They support Ethereum, EOS, and Algorand right now. So I would pick Algorand, and I can configure which social accounts I wanted to log in with, and then present the login screen. You punch in a PIN number for your wallet when you're setting up a user, and then all that stuff happens behind the scenes magically, where you now have a wallet and you have a user on ORID. So Icon also has this blockchain called ORID. That's where they manage all the user stuff. So Icon has ORID, the blockchain. They also have another service called OrVault, which is very interesting for you know, kind of what we're doing in this white label space. So you can see here, it's like for managing digital assets across chains. So that's true. If I use the same SSO thing, right? I'm logging in, tap Google, tap my Rocket account, and I log in, and I do that for some other app that's also using Icon, I can see all the same stuff in my wallet, which is handy. Because that way, if we have another customer that wants to deploy something on Ethereum versus Algorand, we can support that still using Icon and still letting that person manage all their assets from one place, which is handy. The other thing they have is OrVault, which is essentially a great place for like brand owners to kind of manage all of their employees and the people that are involved with their applications. They can see how often they're trading stuff, how much they're trading it for, kind of just some basic analytics around all of the people that have been using their app, which is pretty interesting. So again, Auth0 for blockchain is probably the easiest analogy. I mentioned we're partners with Circle. We know a lot of people from Circle. They do the payment gateway piece. This is actually the tricky piece. So what we want to do is go from, we want the checkout flow to feel completely seamless. Like if you use NBA Top Shot, it just feels like you're on Shopify, right? You just put in your credit card details and you have a thing. So what we need to do behind the scenes is convert US dollars to USDC, which is US dollar coin. That's a stable coin. It's always 1-to-1 with the US dollar. So you never have to worry about price volatility there. And Circle allows us to do this. So we can convert from USD to US dollar coin and then to algos. And at that point, we can do the rest of the transaction for actually, you know, the smart contract or the fixed bid price or whatever we're doing. Circle will allow us to do that. So if, well, let's see here, what do I have next? Okay, so good. So Dapper. So Dapper is a payment gateway. It is built on top of Circle. Dapper is the payment gateway that's being used on NBA Top Shot. It was made by Dapper Labs. And if you look down here under product in that footer, you'll see they have NBA Top Shot and Flow. So Flow is the blockchain also made by Dapper Labs. And it's sort of a developer first blockchain. And the idea is that they can spin up a bunch of stuff on here and build these NFT marketplaces. Now, NBA Top Shot put them very much on everyone's radar. So I'm sure they're slammed with work right now. But Flow is an alternative to Algorand. It doesn't always have to be Algorand for us internally. We do have a partnership with them, but it could be Flow, could be Hive, it could be Tezos. There's a million of them out there. Just like Algorand, Flow is its own blockchain, thus it has its own coin to fuel it. And though it's not tradable on Coinbase, you can at least follow its stats there. Another one that's, I mean, I should say it's popular in terms of a global scenario is Neo. It's China's, like, the government has approved and backed this blockchain, and it has, just like all the other ones, they have their own coin, obviously, and that's been going up and up and up lately. I'm just putting that on everyone's radar. China is hard to ignore, so we'll see what happens with Neo as the years tick forward. Lastly, there's this other service out there called Origin Protocol, where we're not using them right now, but I wanted to put it on people's radars, where it's kind of like the Shopify for decentralized stuff like this, where if you wanted to sell NFTs or goods from a decentralized space, and you want to just set up a storefront and you wanted to work on mobile and desktop web, Origin Protocol is kind of staking their claim in that space. So that's the gist from like the crash course kind of thing. So before I stop recording and start talking about the internal project that we're working on,